Hold the order, call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
Here.
Trustee Dodge?
Here.
Trustee Calandrello?
Here.
Trustee Healy?
Here.
Trustee Katsinas?
Here.
Trustee Malani? Here. Mayor Pico?
Here.
Please rise for pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of December 2nd, 2019 Committee to Hold Minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Katsinas.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole, December 2nd, 2019.
Second. Any questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
John Humphrey Complex renovation update.
Gary?
Mr. Mayor, elected trustees, this is a quick run through, kind of a timeline based on the last meeting we had to kind of bring you guys up to speed as to where we are with the progress on the complex. Little history. Original budget was $600,000, which I believe we're around $2.6 million right now. Once that moved forward, we contracted a consulting service to evaluate the complex usage. The original RFP was issued in November of 18. We did reject all submitted proposals. They all exceeded the budgeted allotment by a great deal. RFP went back out in January of 19. The lowest firm submitting a proposal was V3 Construction Group. That was approved by the village board on the 18th of March in 2019. During the construction process, we began with some soil boring to try and identify the soil profile and find out what was causing the sinking and a lot of the issues we were having at the complex. Beginning of April, we had a kickoff meeting between the vendor and staff, discussed the grading, drainage, and possible MWRD concerns. In April, towards the end of the month, the vendor submitted for a permit from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District that was finally approved in July. Grading and earth moving began in July. Project went on track from that point on until roughly October, when we had quite a bit of rain and at the end of the month a snow event, which kind of dampened the efforts to get a completion date of this year. At the end of October, staff met with the vendor and we compiled issues that were going to be present because of the weather, and we determined it would not be able to complete the project in 2019. 2020, excuse me. A little bit moving forward. December of this year, board approved phase 2 for the project, which would be the renovation of the concessions building and the bathrooms. The initial plans for this complex for the first phase, we had hoped to open in the fall of 2020. That's not going to happen, as seating did not get installed due to weather conditions. Final landscaping enhancements as well as paving was not done, as also due to weather constraints. We are currently working on a proposal for phase 2 to go out for RFP for the renovation of the building. But at this point in time, the complex will not be able to open in 2020 due to the fact that seed was not installed this past fall. It would not be able to germinate and be strong enough to withstand the stress of use at that point in time. It would basically affect the fall sports or football, who is the primary user of the complex during the fall and early winter months. But we would like to give you a high quality end product, and without that seed being established and that root structure being sound, we don't recommend opening the complex in 2020. We recommend the spring of 2021.
Well, Gary, I want to thank you for your review of the information and the timeline over the past couple of years at John Humphrey Complex. I'm sure the question is going to be raised tonight, as it was at the previous meeting, where are the Pioneer football teams going to play in 2020? I'm sure we're going to find a location, if not the same locations that they were in the last year. But I think here that everyone's kind of missing the big picture on this, which is, and first I'd like to give you a brief history on the Pioneers. The Pioneers were founded in 1974. I know, and frankly I remember, because I played in the very first Pioneer football game. I know because my dad was one of the small group of people that helped found the organization. At that time, we were a much smaller community. It made sense to have the Pioneers play where they were playing, behind the Andrew Library, because we didn't have any major field areas. Since that time, the Village of Orland Park has built 2 major complexes and dozens of other parks. The John Humphrey Complex was built in the late 1980s, which added 6 baseball fields to the baseball fields already behind High Point School, but nothing was dedicated for football. In the early 1990s, Centennial Park was built. That park included 9 baseball fields, 2 soccer complexes, a skate park, a sledding hill, a boat launch, a community pool, an ice skating rink, and 2 dog parks. However, nothing was dedicated for football. In the last 30 years, football has been an afterthought of the village officials. Well, I view football and the Pioneers differently. Football and cheerleading teach children a lot of valuable skills: teamwork, discipline, the value of hard work, dedication, courage, communication, and leadership, to name a few. Am I interrupting? As for the Pioneers, I played, my brother played, my sister was a cheerleader, and my son played in the organization. The Pioneers are part of my dad's legacy. Trustee Milani had children that played, and he coached. Trustee Katsinas had a daughter who was a cheerleader, and I think she coached. Trustee Fenton had a daughter who was a cheerleader. We're vested in the organization. Personally, I say enough. Enough of not making a commitment to football. The next major thing I want to see us do is build a dedicated football practice facility, as I promised the Orland Pioneer Board 2 years ago. You can ask Dan McMillan, who was at that meeting, who I think is still on the board for the Pioneers. At my suggestion, the entire village board has agreed to completely redevelop Schuschler Park in 2021. The board has also agreed to a master plan for Centennial Park and to begin reconstruction of Centennial Park in 2022. Rather than continuing to make football an afterthought and shoehorning it into fields that were built for other uses, it's high time that we build a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to meet the needs of the children in Orland Park that participate in football and cheerleading. I don't know what location is best, but either of these facilities can accommodate the field space, storage space, tower, and other requirements of youth football. In my opinion, the board should commit to building a facility designed for football that can be used for other field sports during football's off-season. I am hopeful we can incorporate artificial turf that will hold up to the weather conditions as well. Our staff can work with the Pioneers football program to make sure that their needs are met. Football isn't an afterthought for me. We have already committed to rebuilding these facilities. Let's do it right and make football a priority. It should have been at some point in the past 30 years, but it certainly can be now. I hope that every village trustee joins me in committing to this effort here tonight. Now, I would like to open things up to comments from the public prior to the board having their discussion. I think we have 4 people to speak. Jennifer Shawanka.
My name is Jenny Samanka, and I'm the president of the Orland Park.
Can you use the microphone, please?
In 2017, the Orland Park Pioneers were told that we were not going to be allowed to play football or have cheerleading at the John Humphrey Complex, our home for decades. After attending several board meetings with the tremendous community support of both Pioneer and non-Pioneer families, construction was postponed a year. Renovations of the baseball and softball fields and the football field at the John Humphrey Complex began this past spring. The previous village board assured us that once construction was finished, we would be able to move back to our home at the John Humphrey Complex. For the 2019 football season, we were relocated and our organization was split between Sandburg High School and Centennial Park. Our varsity and JV team practiced on the Sandburg practice field, while our super lightweight team, our lightweight team, 3 flag teams, and all 5 cheer teams were at Centennial Park. Having these alternative sites allowed our program to operate in 2019. However, this temporary solution was not without struggle. These are some of the issues we have had with the alternative locations. It is very hard for parents of multiple kids on different levels to get to multiple locations. Oftentimes, teams were shuffled to other fields at the last minute due to scheduling conflicts. Oftentimes, we had fences in the middle of our fields due to other sports tournaments. We had to rent and pay for multiple banks of lights to illuminate the field space at Sandburg, which put a financial strain on our program. We did not have a field to host games. This year, we were not able to host our share of Wednesday night games due to the field availability at Sandburg. We are very grateful to Sandburg High School and the Village of Orland Park for providing the Pioneers with a temporary home, but we need to know when we can expect to be back at the John Humphrey Complex. From the last village board meeting, there seems to be some confusion as to when the John Humphrey Complex will be available. Even more alarming, and much to our surprise, at the September village board meeting, it was mentioned that football would not be going back to the John Humphrey Complex. And furthermore, it was mentioned that there was to be a board vote to determine whether football and cheerleading would be allowed to return. If the Pioneers do not have a permanent field to call home, football in Orland Park will be unable to continue. Our registration opens in 2 weeks, and this information is vital in determining if the fees need to be raised to account for the added expenses that come along with being relocated for the entire 2020 season. If the case is that we cannot return to our home at the John Humphrey Complex, where does the village plan on having the Pioneers' home be located? To have a permanent home for the Pioneers, we need several things: a football field to host games, permanent bathroom facilities, permanent storage, parking, lighting, a permanent structure to gather when bad weather arises, field space for all our teams to practice together, and field goalpost. The only location in Orland Park that provides these options, along with a tower and scoreboard, is the John Humphrey Complex. We are asking that the village support the Pioneers by voting to allow us to continue to use John Humphrey Complex as our home. One thing I did want to address is that there is an inaccuracy in the Crushmore report. The report states that the John Humphrey Complex hasn't historically been used as a game field. In fact, it was always used as a game field until the field started to deteriorate 5 to 6 years ago and conditions of the concession building worsened. If the John Humphrey Complex was improved, the majority of our home games would be played there. If you are not aware, please be advised that all our neighboring football and cheer programs, such as Homer Glen, Tinley, Frankfort, and New Lenox, have the support of their villages. We are asking for the same support that our neighboring towns receive and that we are customary to receiving. We also ask the village to please work more closely with the youth organizations on a regular basis to keep us informed. I would also appreciate if each one of you can tell me tonight, do you support the Pioneers returning to the John Humphrey Complex? Can I ask that?
It's not your place to ask the board to place a vote on anything, so if anyone else has any comments, thank you for your comments. Chris Stefanos.
Chris Stefanos, Orland Park Pioneers AD. A few of the Pioneer board members are going to speak tonight. They are not only board members, they are also parents, coaches, and volunteers. I believe they will convey the questions and concerns we have as a program. I would only like to read an email sent last year in support of the Pioneers. I think it speaks volumes as to what our organization is all about. Mayor Pico and trustees, I am a proud Orland Park native and I am very thankful for the Orland Park Pioneers. Frankly, I wouldn't be where I am in life today without the program. I was very disappointed to find out that you've made a decision to move the Orland Park Pioneers practice and game facility to Schuessler Park for the potential softball and baseball revenue tournaments at the John Humphrey Complex. In my humble opinion, this is the wrong decision. The issues you've created are numerous and it will impact the children and families of Orland Park. I would urge you to reconsider and keep the Pioneers where they belong, the John Humphrey Complex. Go Cats and Pioneers. Pat Fitzgerald, head football coach, Northwestern football. Coach Fitzgerald is one of our most famous Sandburg alums and Pioneers. The Pioneers thank you, Mayor Pico and trustees, for hearing us today.
Thank you for your comments. Bonnie Messino?
Hi, I'm Bonnie Messino, a third-year Pioneer board member and a seven-year Pioneer family member. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight on the Pioneer behalf. I have 6 children of my own that have previously played or are currently on the Orland Park Pioneers. My kids have played numerous sports through the years, including basketball, hockey, gymnastics, tennis, baseball, and soccer, to name just a few. And they have played for many of the well-known youth and school organizations around our community the past 10 years. But our family has never experienced and been welcomed by any other organization than from the Pioneer family. I can also tell you my kids have tried out for various youth travel and competitive sporting organizations and have been given opportunities to be on these teams, but they have decided against joining them at the last minute because of the time commitment that would interfere from playing on their favorite team, the Pioneers. The biggest aspect that brought us the sense of family and unity to this program was without a doubt the home base we had for our organization was John Humphrey Field. During my family's time on the Pioneers, I have seen this program grown by leaps and bounds. It draws in more kids every year, and our football program has won many championships, including our Wednesday Night League championship and Super Bowls. The cheerleading program, which my girls love, has gone from strictly a rec program to joining the IRCA, where our cheerleaders can now perform in several competitions during the season in Illinois. And just recently now, our Pioneers is offering a spring season for our cheerleaders to continue to compete year-round. Our program draws in more and more of our kids each year and is beneficial to our community. While I might be in the minority for our large family, I can definitely bring a much-needed perspective of having multiple children in any youth program. It was only just this past season did my family feel the disconnect in the program, as our organization was asked to leave our home base where all our cheerleader and football players practiced together for many years. We had to relocate to various other fields around Orland Park. This season, I now had 4 children on the Pioneers and shuffling between Sandburg and the Centennial Fields, in addition to coaching, and then a few weeks later, relocating our cheerleaders to several District 135 schools. The season became very hectic for us. The Orland Park Pioneers football and cheerleading program is the only program that is currently offered in Orland Park. It is important we remain competitive and draw in kids from our community to this top-rated and very successful football and cheerleading program. Without a home base and not even knowing where the Pioneers will practice even next season, the future of Pioneers could be in jeopardy. I'm asking all village board members to please consider our request to have the Orland Park Pioneers remain at the John Humphrey Field. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Andrew Brennan?
Thank you, Mayor Pico and the Board of Orland Park, the trustees, thank you. Thank you to my fellow board members for giving me the opportunity to come up here and talk. My name is Andrew Brennan. I'm on the board of the Pioneers. I've been an assistant coach. I've been a head coach. I'm now a board member. I've coached OYA for years. My son, my daughter are also part of the Pioneers. I wanted to thank you. Oh, I'm also on the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. Mayor Pico appointed me this last summer. I wanted to thank you, Mayor Pico, for your comments tonight. They sounded much like the many conversations that you and I have had about the Pioneers. I would like to see a lot of that come to fruition before it's too late. I'm not a Southsider by birth. I've had the distinct honor of marrying a Southsider. I've lived down here for 15 years, in Orland Park in the last 7 years. When you're not from down here, it's pretty hard to get used to. When you all are from here, you don't realize how different you all are from the rest of the Chicagoland. I never truly felt part of something until I met these guys and ladies right over here and became a part of the Pioneer program. It's a really unique community, and I've been involved in a lot of sports at a lot of different levels. The Orland Park Pioneer community is something really special. This last year has been a strain on our community. As some of my fellow board members have said, coaches, families had to choose which kid's showing up to practice late, which kid's going to stand there and wait for mom or dad to show up, which coach is going to stand there and wait with their kid while we wonder where their mom is as they go up and down the Grange and up and down the back roads. The Orland Park program was faced with the burden of additional costs with the lights and the storage, a cost that unfortunately is going to end up trickling down to the families. A lot of people will say, well, baseball plays over here, they play over there, they play over there, it's no problem. There's north of 25 baseball fields, I think, in Orland Park. There's zero football fields in Orland Park. I fear that if we continue to make our program a burden on families, eventually they're going to have to decide, is this worth it? And if we go through another year like we did this last year, some families, some already have, some are going to decide it's not worth it. And just like anything else, if we lose our numbers and we lose our families, there goes our community. I think it's extremely important to realize what we're asking for. We're not asking for an investment. We're not asking for money. We're asking for a piece of grass to play football on. A field where our children can safely learn and practice the game of football and cheerleading and the importance of being a part of and feeling involved in a community. We're not asking for an investment. All we need is some grass, some lights, fields, bathroom, storage, and about 135 parking spots. Which leaves us 3 options in Orland Park. Schussler, which the mayor's already commented that, I know you guys have talked about redoing that. And I think that sounds great. But what do we do in the next 2 years? And then once that gets delayed, and once another $2 and $3 million goes over budget on that, where are we in 5 years when we're still standing here asking you where we're going to play? Centennial has a lot of space. We need a moderate level of investment to make that meet our needs. We don't have adequate safety. We don't have adequate storage. Many times the bathrooms were locked. Many times I had softball fences up and down the middle of my football field. In addition to that, it only housed half of our program. The other half of the program was at Carl Sandburg High School, which if I was a South Sider, I would have just called it Sandburg, right? And as they already said, we had to pay for the lights over there. John Humphrey requires 0 additional investment. It has everything we need as a program. I appreciate that we've spent over $2 million redoing this facility. I believe it's been long overdue. I just hate to think that we did all that and the Pioneers are going to get kicked in the butt because of it. The argument will be made, it's been said to me before, that Orland Park citizens didn't pay $2.6 million to have their football fields ruined, their fields ruined by football. And if that's the case, I think we need to ask the question, does football ruin fields? Any more so than youth baseball or youth soccer? Does it require any additional investment or refurbishing costs more than the already scheduled seeding that happens biannually, I believe, every year anyway? As has already been said, we're the only program on the south side without a home facility. We are the only program on the south side of Chicago without a home facility. Again, I just want to end by saying it's important to remember what we're asking for. A safe and secure facility to continue to grow our program and keep Orland Park families interested in an active part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Calangelo.
a couple comments and a couple questions. I guess, Gary, whoever wants to answer this question, have we reached out to all the organizations who use John Humphrey Complex and updated them about the new schedule? So, I mean, because we got baseball, Spartan, we could all name them all right now.
We have not.
Okay. And is there any mechanism where we're communicating with all these sports teams? I feel like there's always a communication gap with these sports organizations, and they're our customers. I just feel like we got to get some kind of mechanism. I don't know if it's Bo, if it's your secondhand person, or whoever, but we really got to start communicating with these teams. I think the only reason why the Pioneers are forced is because they watched last board meeting and saw that there's comments about them not playing on 2020. So I guess it just, and maybe it's a communication difference, maybe since we kind of no longer have committees structure, maybe there's not one trustee to talk over anymore, but I feel like we got to really work on these communication gaps, especially with our sports teams, because that, I think, solves a lot. And Gary, you could probably answer this question, maybe Bo. We designed the field. We spent $2.2 million putting football back there, correct? We would have changed the design a tad, at least some of the grading in the outfield, if we weren't going to put football there. Is that a correct statement?
The baseball fields were designed for additional drainage to help improve the area that football plays in.
Right, so you wouldn't have a flat surface in the outfield of whatever the south diamonds are, correct? So we altered it based on football coming back.
It was designed so that was an area that was extremely difficult to drain, so they did put additional drainage into those areas.
Okay, so we spent additional money to put football back there. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is that a safe statement? To make sure the drainage is proper instead of an outfield?
Well, the drainage is there for whatever it's programmed there, be it baseball, football, soccer, what have you. There was additional drainage put in where their main football field was.
Okay. And I support the Pioneers, and everyone's just trying to help the kids learn lessons and whatnot, and I support the mayor and his long-term goal. We talked about this, a facility that the mayor's talking about is, I think we put a pen to and paper to it, $5 million plus, and we've talked about the location on 153rd. I think we call it dump right now, where we're moving all that assets to the new dump by the Metro train station. But that's $5 million, give or take, and we're not even done cleaning up that facility. So I support the mayor and his long-term goal. We talked about the different locations, but I guess we took away something, and at least the board at that time said you're coming back to the Pioneers, and don't forget we also have St. Michael's and other organizations. So I know one of the young ladies who talked wanted a vote of if we can come back, if the Pioneers can come back and St. Michael's come back, and I'm a yes. I could use a stronger word than that, but I think we promised them that at that time. Without a suitable home, they should come back. And I know, Gary, you bounce around a little bit, but, we increased the drainage. I was in those meetings to make sure that the fields were proper for football. So I just did two comments. I think we should, in order, because Pioneer and St. Michael's and others need to plan their seasons out. I mean, so I'm glad that they know 2 weeks before the registration that they know they can't go back to John Humphrey Complex because of the renovations. I understand delays happen, but I think we need to either tonight or I think tonight we should talk about what this board wants to do in 2021 because it's only proper and decent, and also there's things that we can save on funds if we don't have football going back there. We don't have to put a field post thing in there. So with that, I'm ending in two things. First of all, I think we as a board have to tell, and we should tell the public what we want to do in 2021. And two, I think we got to really work on a communication with these teams. I don't know how we can do that, but we really do. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Fenton.
First of all, I'd like to correct one thing, and it was my fault when the mayor did ask me about my daughter and my son if they played Pioneers. At the time, I said yes, it was probably the pneumonia. I was still a little wacky. But actually, my daughter played for the Knights, so sorry, Pioneers. But I've always been a big supporter of that, although my kids were soccer players, not football players, or that. But I was always under the impression that you were going, I mean, you made it sound like you've been kicked out of, here completely. But I was under the impression, as Trustee Calandrello was, that you were going back to Humphrey once everything was settled. I know we discussed Schussler Park. Schussler Park can't even handle the soccer fields and the soccer players over there. There is no parking. I mean, the parking over there is the most ridiculous situation that we have in the village for field usage. So I have always been in favor of either a brand-new facility, which, as Trustee Calandrello said, unless we can find $5 million from the fairy godmother, I don't know when that would happen, but I was under the assumption you were going back as soon as the field was ready. Unfortunately, due to weather and circumstances beyond our control, we don't want to put you on a field that's going to be detrimental to the health and safety of the children. So the 2021, I know, is a super disappointment here, but it would be we're looking for the safety. And after we put all this money into it, we don't want anybody to get hurt and or ruin the fields. But I personally don't feel football belongs over at Schussler. It's just not, there's no accommodations over there there's no permanent bathrooms, there's no concession stand, when you bring in one of your big football games or your homecoming, I've been there. There's no parking and that's at this facility we have now that has tons of parking. So, like I said, rah-rah, I'm for you to go back to Humphrey, but unfortunately you can't do it till 2021. So, willing to help you with Sandberg or whoever you need help with to make them a little bit more friendly on the lighting situation, but that's all.
Any other comments?
Mayor Pico,
Trustee Katsinas.
I just want to say what a wonderful program the Pioneers organization, what they do for the kids of Orland Park, and the commitment from all the coaches and the parents. My daughter was a member of the cheer team. Because of that experience, she went on to be a varsity captain at Sandberg for Palms, and she teaches that now at another high school. So anything we can do or I can do, I am all for the Pioneers, getting them back at Humphrey. Thank you.
Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge.
A couple things. I want to parse this apart. So it seems that we've got a motion in front of us to vote to keep it closed because of turf, right? And I guess what I'm hearing, making sure I got this right from staff, is reality is a constraint, and we have to deal with what we've had from a weather perspective and usage, correct?
Correct.
Got it. So I think that's relatively straightforward. I think everybody gets it. The broader issue in my mind, and I had this conversation with George earlier, which is I think we need to have a follow-on conversation that connects all the multiple threads that are going on here. So let's just say that from the folks that I've talked to, I don't think we're doing as good a job as we can as an entity communicating with our customers. So I think that there's a better flow of communication we can bring back to all the teams and all the parents that are connected. But, I think that could be taken care of. I certainly would love to see you guys come back to what's traditionally been your home, right? So that certainly would support that. But to me, the biggest issue here, and the threads that we're going to need to continue to discuss, is how does all the things we're doing to our parks across this town intersect with all of the demand for fields from all of the youth sports? What is our grand plan for all of these things? This is a great update, and thank you for bringing it forward, but we should continue this conversation, quite frankly. Come back and show everybody all the moving parts. This is what we're doing to Centennial. This is what we're doing to Park A, Park B. This is what we're doing to Humphrey. And then let's make sure that all the folks that are in these various boards understand what we're doing. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I quite frankly don't think that we've quite got all the gears to mesh yet, right? So I'd like to have that broader conversation. I'd like everybody to see it up on this screen. This is what we're doing and when, given the reality. So that's just one idea. Along with that, I think this board needs to take on, perhaps at a future committee of the whole meeting. I was one of the first ones out on point to say I think Orland Park ought to look at investing in a multi multi-sport complex with turf fields. Let's just get right after it. So we're spending a fair bit of money because we had to, we need to, but there's a bigger, longer play. Where those fields go, exactly what we do, how we program them, that's a big conversation. But I'll remind everybody, I was one of the first ones to be out there as a proponent of doing some of that stuff. So let's have the conversation. First things first, explain it simply to myself and to everybody else in Orland Park, how all these gears mesh. Let's talk about the communications plan, and let's talk about a multi-year journey to put millions of dollars into fields that we can truly be proud of. Because I've heard from folks in football, I've heard from folks in soccer, there's issues with their fields, a lot of issues with their fields, and they get right at safety. So let's go for the broader solve.
So really quickly on that, we have already budgeted, this whole board agreed to budget for master planning for Centennial Park, for Schuschler Park, for Centennial Park West, to bring all of that, the information you just asked for, to bear. So I believe that's, you can give us the timeline on that, George.
So, and Gary can chime in here, but we're right now wrapping up the RFP for consultant for all three of those master plans as part of one big project.
Discussion item.
And that whole process then will start in the spring in earnest. And so the whole goal here is to have a full-blown master plan for park facilities completed in 2020.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Healy?
I'd like to know, how many parks do we have?
65.
65, and only three, we can only put football field on 3 of them. There are some big parks out there, sure.
The size that's required for a football field, that number dwindles quite quickly. We have Centennial, Schuschler, Humphrey, unless you reprogrammed, other sites such as Catchy Park, which is home to soccer. Yep. It would affect somebody trying to find a spot that big. Parking-wise, the only areas that we have anywhere near the parking that they require would be Schuschler, Centennial. Humphrey has a lot of spots as well.
Well, I think it's important that we get the football program going, and whether, can't say if it's going to be this year or next year, but I am also not, I think maybe there's temporary parking lots or lights that could be installed at any of these fields. I'm not sure what the alternatives are. I haven't, I don't know if we've looked at any other of the parks for this. And that's number one. And number two is, I'm not, spending $5 million on a football field, I'm a little not ready to jump on that bandwagon yet. It's, and part of it is just looking at financial issues down the road. Some of our neighboring suburbs got $9 million from Illinois. We got 0. So maybe if somebody knows somebody at the state of Illinois, they could get us money for a football field. So that's my comment.
Any other comments? Mr. Chairman. Trustee Malani?
As Mayor Pecom mentioned earlier, both of my sons were part of the Pioneer organization. Kevin, he played football for 1 year. Definitely wasn't for him. But Tyler, he played football for 8 years, and I also coached for 5 years. So I completely understand and I empathize with this situation. That being said, as Mayor Pecom mentioned, football did always seem to be kind of an oversight or maybe an afterthought at Humphrey. We were kind of sandwiched in there. Only 1 or 2 of the teams had the opportunity to actually practice on the football field at any given time. It was usually the JV or the varsity, which is fine. They deserve the higher priority to practice on the field. But the younger kids, we all got pushed out to a corner, on the hill, in a drainage basin, or in a small section where kids could play and block and tackle. So all of this is clearly not designed for football. For anybody that actually had walked on those fields back then, there were poor drainage. We had divots from, helmets, and it could have been a combination of softball, it could have been the baseball games, it could have been football, but that field was torn up. But even back then, we had several coaches that would complain about playing on the field. So, but we also played a lot of home games at Marist instead of Humphrey at that time. We did play some of our home games there. And then we moved to, I think the last season that Tyler played in, I think we played 2 games at Humphrey. The rest of them were at Sandburg, Marist, and our away games. So we were able to make do. We were able to play, we were able to go to fields, and we were able to let kids enjoy football. But that being said, you can effectively practice football just about anywhere, practice football, but you need a field to play. And, you know, the Pioneers have been using Sandburg as their home field and practice area for some time now. I don't know if Sandburg has, you know, given you any complaints about that happening. You know, and if I was a kid in football, I'd love to play on a $1.5 million turf field with lights. I mean, it's a great time on that field. You know, I remember, you know, we played with, you know, many teams. We played at high school fields that were shared with our local teams. I think the Knights used to share Lincoln Way Central. I think Lincoln Way West, we played some games there. You know, so it's not out of sight to actually, you know, be able to use a high school football field. But there's also other areas, like Homer, like New Lenox, dedicated facilities for football. And that's all that is played there is football. It's not shared with baseball. Here we have conflicting, you know, priorities. It's clearly designed for baseball, and football many years ago was wedged in there because it was a close enough spot and a big enough area to put football in there. So yeah, we built the infrastructure around it. Well, this is many years later. So we spent a lot of money to renovate this complex, and playing on those outfields of baseball fields is only going to eventually get us right back into the situation we're in now. Over time, the fields are going to deteriorate. We're going to have the same issue, and we talk about spending $5 million on a new football field. Well, we're going to have to go back and revitalize the fields again at a later date because we're playing on them anyway. So a dangerous and potentially dangerous ripped-up football field, you know, played in a distressed baseball outfield. That's where we are today. I think there has to be a better plan and a better way to solve this. So, you know, hopefully, you know, we can, you know, find a way to do that. You know, Trustee Dodge brought up a good point. Back when I was on the Economic Development Advisory Board back in 2017, I think we were talking about the possibilities of, you know, finding a way to build some type of complex to have a multi-sport facility. And I think if we could do something, you know, and meet in the middle ground here, I think that's what we're looking to do. So.
Any other comments?
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
Just, George, so when can we expect the master plans to come back, and when might that be available to share with the public and the teams?
Well, we're going to put the RFP out for the consulting services here very shortly. And as part of any of these types of master plans, there's a lot of community feedback that has to go into it. So so that whole process is going to start in the spring. I don't know exactly when we envision the actual reports being done, but we're working on it right now based on having the budget just recently approved.
It feels to me that the outline of the plan and when things are going to happen, at least in a proposed sense, is probably a worthwhile for us, communication for us to do sooner rather than later. I don't think people would misunderstand if we said we're going out to RFP, we expect it to take X amount of time, the window for getting community feedback is X. Let's just get it out there as a plan, because I think there's a lot of people who, you know, my sense of the discussion tonight is we want to solve the problem. Weather's not helping us. There's a bigger, broader issue, and I think Trustee Malani might have been going in this direction, and Mayor Pico and I have had this conversation a number of times. Orland is in perfect position to go after some tournaments which could be very valuable to this community on multiple dimensions. Well, not with the current level of facilities. And so I think we're all talking about that. So as we go down this pathway, I don't think it's an inappropriate thing to bring back up to the public that we're looking at it. Let's just tell them the conceptual plan for now in terms of at least the timing would be my recommendation.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calandrello.
I just want to make sure George has clear direction for the future. Is there clear direction on 2021 that football will be back?
I don't think we're placing that on a vote tonight. It's not on the agenda to vote for that tonight.
Can I ask for a consensus at least? Can I ask for consensus?
I don't think it's the appropriate place to ask until you put it on the agenda.
All right, then I would like.
If you want to put put something on the agenda for the next time for an agenda initiative, feel free. But I don't think it's fair to tie the hands of a future board at this particular juncture when we don't know what we're going to run into next year.
God willing, we're all going to be here next year, Mr. Mayor. And also, if it's on, so this is maybe a learning thing, since we're on a committee of the whole, do I have to put it back on initiative to get back? So maybe can someone walk me through of how do I get this to a vote, since we're talking about it in a committee of the whole? Because I can't put anything on the agenda?
We can, we'll get this on the, we'll get it on the regular agenda.
Regular agenda for January 2nd, or that January date, the first one in January, is that what you like? The 6th, whatever that first one in January.
Okay.
I feel like it's for everyone, for staff, our residents, being good stewards of the our tax dollars to make sure we don't waste money on on field goal polls. I think it should be on the agenda. So I guess I'm requesting that to be on the agenda. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Centennial Park West events and walks.
Mr. Mayor, Board. For some time now, we host quite a few special events at Centennial Park along the 153rd Street metro location. Most of these walks are nonprofits. Some of the larger ones, JDRF, juvenile diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's. As we keep getting larger events and more events being requested, we're running into issues with parking and utilization of that space. One example of an issue we had last year, the Cancer Society's walk caused roughly $20,000 worth of damage to the soccer fields at 153rd Street. We were out of commission for about 6-7 months. Very recently, we had to reschedule the pumpkin party due to weather constraints. The date that we rescheduled happened to be the same week and the JDRF was setting up. We also had a softball tournament, a soccer tournament. So the facility gets quite heavily used. What we're asking to do is to possibly shift the start and stop of these special events, these nonprofit walks, to the Centennial West location. There's ample parking there. We're roughly around 1,100 spaces, and it wouldn't conflict with any field rentals or any of the other organizations that are currently using Centennial Park.
I'll entertain a motion to recommend the village board approve the venue change to Centennial West for nonprofit 501c3 events, and the current fee structure for said events remain at the current levels.
Second.
Any comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Calendrola.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
2020 Land Development Code Amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and other members of the village board. This item before you tonight is typically we go back and amend various sections of our code after evaluation. This particular amendment, the main change that was instituted was to make sure that the land development code reflects the changes that were approved by the village board on November 18th to go to the committee of the whole structure, and that way that our development proposals moving forward will reflect what is now in the village code. The other item specific to that amendment is that the what we are instituting or requesting for the village board to approve is development projects that go to planning commission and receive unanimous approval at that level will go directly to the village board for approval. They will be placed on the regular agenda, and the items that they will skip the committee of the whole for that step. The other amendments that are proposed are basically just cleanup items that we had from previous amendments, whether they weren't included correctly in the proposed land development code change, or if the language needed some adjustment based on having an opportunity to utilize them once the code was instituted. If the committee at this time has any questions about a specific amendment, we can go over that.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calendrola.
I noticed, I know we briefly talked about it in the committee, when we had the committee structure, talked about temporary signage.
We need to make a motion first here, and then we can carry on a discussion.
Sure, no problem, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like to make the motion?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I move to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of the 2020 Land Development Code Amendments Number 1 as recommended at the December 3rd, 2019 Planning Commission meeting and is further referenced below.
Second.
Trustee Calendaro?
Thank you. Was there any conversation regarding temporary, loosening up temporary sign, the temporary sign codes at all? 'Cause I know we had a conversation about, go ahead.
Yeah, well, at this point, we haven't included that amendment. We are going to, like I said, the focus of this one was just to make sure that we got the changes in time to reflect the committee of the whole as soon as possible. But we are going to follow up almost immediately after the new year with another round of amendments that will include some discussion about what we talked about for temporary signage.
Perfect. I look forward to that because we talked about how
Yep.
the boys, the Boy Scouts are going to have to go through the whole process and spend a lot of money on a sign for a weekend bake sale. Look forward to that conversation.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Dodge?
question for staff. So in the sign ordinances, it only looked like there was one red line strike, is that correct?
There was one, and then there was also that what they have changed is made all of the, previously Old Orland Historic District had its own specific sign regulations. Those regulations were moved to the sign code as well.
Okay. And then we're still allowing sandwich boards and A-frames, correct?
Correct, at this point.
So no changes on that piece?
That has not changed as of yet.
Okay.
Any other comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Calendaro.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Vintage Crossings drainage.
Excuse me. Earlier this year, we received some complaint from Vintage Crossing and Fawn Ridge. Excuse me. I apologize. We received some complaints about flooding in Vintage Crossing and Fawn Ridge, and that the backyards are flooding, and people are concerned that that water may come into their basement. And so after that request, the staff spent some time in the office, in the field. To learn about the reasons and causes for the flooding. So what we have done today is we have set up this presentation that will walk you through the issues we have and what are the possible solutions for that and how can we address that. These are the items that we will discuss today. As I mentioned, the purpose of this presentation, it will give you a background of these two subdivisions and the problems we are facing and what are some of the next steps and how can we resolve that flooding issue. This subdivision is located at 108 and 167 subdivision at that intersection, near that intersection. And it currently has two different types of stormwater systems. The first system, which I will show you in graphics as well, the first system here is there's underground pipes that are located here that collects water for 0 to 10 year storm. But beyond that 11-year to 100-year storm, this is designed that the water will flow over ground or above ground into soils that are supposed to be located here. And then it gets into a bigger manhole, water inlet, and then the water gets into this pond. So those are the two things I mentioned. And then there are about 9 water inlets throughout the properties that are located in this there are 9 properties located, 9 water inlets located in this area that takes water into the pipe and then gets it out here. The village has about 20 foot of easement in the backyard of Vintage Crossing as well as Fawn Ridge. That is a permanent easement that requires the homeowners to maintain that easement. And I'll show you some pictures with that. So what has happened in the backyard, that the homeowners have added fence, sheds, or they have actually, I wouldn't say that the homeowners, but some way in the last 18 years or so, people have leveled the backyard where the swales, the water's flowing swales have disappeared and water is unable to flow. And that is what you will show in some of the pictures. The other thing that we will discuss is that tall grass development has started construction earlier this year, which is affecting some of the stormwater flow. And because of these reasons, the water is not flowing in the Fawn Ridge as well as Vintage Crossing. So these are some of the pictures that was earlier in the summer that we have taken. And what you will see here is this is the water that is in Vintage Crossing, and that's the water that is in Grassland. The reason that water has gone over there, because before the construction of Grassland, before the development of tall grass development, the water was able to just go from Vintage Crossing into tall grass. But they have started building their berm, which is basically stopping this water to go from this subdivision into that subdivision. And they have the right to do that. That's how their subdivision is designed. Come on. This is another picture of the same, that's Vintage Crossing subdivision with the, I'm standing in the picture in the patio of a homeowner, and you can see some of the water is coming closer to this house. This is another picture where water is shown in the tall grass property. The point of all of this is that once tall grass property is complete, no water will be able to come from Vintage Crossing into tall grass, and then it has to be accommodated into the stormwater system that was originally designed for Vintage Crossing and Fawn Ridge. Here's one more picture of what is out there currently, where a shed was built, which is in the swales, fence you can see full height. All of this is blocking water from flowing from north to south and then west. Come on. So Village Land Development Code has an ordinance that says no lot shall be allowed to divert, modify, or change grade elevations from an approved engineering drawing without approval from the Director of Engineering. What our analysis shows that, as I said before, that the backyard grades have changed and the water is unable to flow. I'm having difficulties, this slide is not moving forward. The last point on this one is that tall grass property cannot be used for stormwater because that's a separate property and they have the right to build their own berm and protect their property and have their own stormwater system. This is again another picture of that same.
So, Kashid, if I could stop you here for a second, if I can summarize what I think is happening here, is that we have a previously built subdivision where the swales were filled in, which therefore the water doesn't run to where it was originally intended to, but because there was no construction behind it, it was able to freely flow there, which of course now there is construction behind it, and they are not required to hold the retention for those other homes. And so that's essentially the situation that we have. So we have flooding because those swales were filled in by the existing homeowners. Is that pretty much covered in a
That
nutshell?
is, that is true, Mayor, that is the problem we have. So let me jump into the solution that we think we can propose. So the solution is that the backyard grades has to be adjusted, reestablish the flow in the backyard using the swales. And how should it be done? It should be done by the property owners. Village has nothing to do with it, and discussions with the village manager's office or so, the village is not interested, or really is not responsible, and they have to maintain that, and village is not interested in spending any of its own money to fix this problem. It is a homeowner's or property owner's problem. So what we did about a month ago or so, we retained a consultant to do a site survey to collect the grades that is available in the backyard at our own expense, at the village expense. And then we also designed the stormwater system that can allow for this system to operate properly as it should have been. And so the first option is that the homeowners or the property owners fix it on an individual basis. The challenge with that there will be a lot of coordination. There's 13 properties that are involved in this issue. Then they have to have a coordination with each other, and because there will be 13 different work or 13 different contractors, the cost will be much higher, a longer construction schedule, and potential damage to their front yard as well as their side yards. So we have been actively looking for how best we can help this process. So we have worked with a solution if all of the property owners collectively agree to solve this problem, that the tall grass developer has agreed to allow construction access from his side, as well as absorb any of the construction spoil that may come out of this effort be absorbed in his property, so that we don't have to haul it away off-site using a truck and other equipment. If we do that, the village is willing to, or village staff is willing to act as a point of contact or a liaison. However, we ran into some other problems that I will show you in one or two slides. So because different homeowners have done different work in their backyard, the requirement would be that the property owners who have fences in their backyard or vegetable gardens or sheds, they have to remove it at their own expense. And once they are done, then the contractor can come in and build a swale, and then at that time, the homeowners can go back and repair the backyard to their liking, with the requirement that they must maintain the drainage easement as it will be finished by the contractor. Well, the problem we have ran into is that there's no cost information available because no contractor wants to work with 13 different homeowners. They are very concerned that this will be a very difficult task if they have to deal with 13 different owners. And staff has done some cost estimate. Our estimate shows that it's anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 expense. We haven't confirmed that, but that's based on our understanding of the issue that we have at hand and an understanding of what it takes to do construction in the winter months. The requirement from tallgrass developer is that this work must be done by March 31st, because then they want to get into their own backyards and complete their work starting April. So if we want to take advantage of this offer from tallgrass, it has to be done in the next couple of months. So to get the work done, the village has to act as the primary legal entity in signing a contract with a contractor that can do the work. And then village has to find a way to get reimbursed from the homeowners or the property owners. I think that our concern is, what if all property owners do not agree to this solution? Then what we have thought about that, then village will issue maintenance tickets to each property owner, and in the next step would be to put a lien on their property. The bottom line on this one, that the work has to be done because it protects Vintage Crossing and Fawn Ridge. The other part, that this stormwater system is related to 90 acres of other development that is further behind it. 40 acres of direct impact and 90 acres of indirect impact. So this connection has to be established, otherwise we have a larger issue at our hand. That is the summary of my presentation.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Plenty. Trustee
Chairman.
Dodge.
So it's certainly not the first time the village has dealt with folks making changes in the public rights-of-way, various and sundry forms. We've had to deal with things like this in the past, and here we are again. So we'll figure out a mechanism to get the work done and figure out how to fair share for everybody, so that doesn't strike me as a big issue. How is this missed? How did whatever surveyor, whatever engineer, whoever went out there and approved this, how did they miss that these swales over time had been modified or had filled? It sure feels to me somebody missed it in the field.
Christian, can you show that picture? Go back to the area, the satellite photo. And then if you can just point out how the water was going onto tall grass.
Just the overview.
That one
right there.
So, come on, this is not working either. So, the water at this point, before tall grass construction started, there was no berm here. As the water was coming in everybody's backyard, it was just spilling over into tall grass property. Though how it was missed, I'm not sure that's how I can explain that, because over the years, this first house, in this subdivision, the first house was built in 1992, or 18 years ago or so. And since then, people have done work in their backyard without, some of them have done without permit.
We approved a berm, correct?
Excuse me?
We approved a berm?
Maybe let me answer this question. So we approved the berm for Vintage Crossing, which is on Tallgrass, I'm sorry, on Tallgrass's property, which is standard. The hunt for blame here is not beneficial, because these homes were built in 1992. The reason this happened, someone who knows a little bit about drainage, is that there was supposed to be a swale here. If people filled those swales in over time, the water doesn't flow the way it was originally designed by Orland Park and what was originally approved by Orland Park. So we don't go out and routinely inspect. I'm sure we haven't had an inspector on your house looking at drainage, or my house looking at drainage, or anybody else's homes at drainage once the project's done. So that would be, I don't think we have the manpower to go out and investigate the 20,000 homes we have to see if the drainage is. But they've basically, the lot owners filled it in, and that's the issue.
Actually, Mayor, I disagree. So hunt for blame is a pejorative term. I'm asking a process question. So we approved a berm on the new subdivision, correct?
Correct.
So an engineer went out there, and presumably the professional engineer knew something about the flow of water. I'm pretty sure this follows basic Newtonian laws. So we approved a berm, and we did
Which
not...
laws are those? Is that the law of gravity?
Yeah, I think that is a law of
Is
gravity.
that the one you're talking
Yeah,
about?
that's what I'm talking about. And so
Okay.
how
Or force.
did we miss that these things were filled in?
So, I'm not sure, Trustee Dodge, I'm understanding, how do we miss that? Because the berm that we accepted or approved for tall grass is on their property, and they have the right to build that. Though, once that berm was what came up, that's when we learned that the water from Vintage Crossing is not flowing. So,
Okay. So they filled in they made some changes to the back of the property, happens a lot. We approved the berm, and after the berm, then folks started having flooding issues.
correct,
Did I get the sequence right?
correct.
Okay, that's helpful for me to understand.
So at this point, what we're going to do is have another meeting with the Vintage Crossing residents, and then really just going to come down to two options that have to occur relatively quickly. One is they could do the work themselves, or two, the village can facilitate it, and we'll have to come up with a mechanism. If we facilitate it, it's going to be a lot cheaper on each of the homeowners. We hope we can get their cooperation. We wanted to give the board kind of a heads up that we are going to play a little bit of a bigger role in this one, but someone has to coordinate this, because, like Krishid said, individual contractors will not take this on their own because of all the different property owners. So I just wanted to give the board a heads up on what's happening here.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Agenda initiative?
Trustee Healy, I believe you brought this forward. Would you like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I move to recommend that a resolution be drafted and brought forward to the Board of Trustees requesting that the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, and the Illinois Attorney General enforce laws regarding robocalls.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy.
I think that this community would be better off without unidentified robocalls. I think they're degrading, they're degrading to the fiber of the community, and I just don't see why our the law enforcement community in charge of stopping this just doesn't do it. I think there's been, it's gotten down to attacking family and all that, and I think it could present a danger to family members. And I think, I'd like to see some actions taken by this. I know that I feel that the Cook County State's Attorney and the State of Illinois Attorney General, this is not a real high priority for them. I mean, there's murders and everything, but still, we should push forward to addressing this issue and make this a better community if we can put a stop to this.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Malani.
Yeah, I'd also be happy to see this resolution drawn up. I think, to be blunt, I'm tired of them. I think probably everybody in this room is tired of them. No matter which side they were attacking, the illegal calls were just that, illegal. They were vicious, they were vulgar, usually unfounded, misconstrued facts, just to spin a storyline. So I think they've also crossed the line attacking friends, family, spouses, and children of elected officials. I think they need to be investigated fully, and the perpetrator of these calls must be stopped, fined, or whatever it takes to get him or her to stop. They're not only starting to tarnish the perception of the village, I believe that they're also starting to turn off the residents of Orland Park as well.
Any other comments? I'll just, my only comment will be, I'm not sure what good this will do, but I'm happy to do a resolution. So with that, call the roll.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Need a motion to adjourn? Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll reconvene the board meeting in 5 minutes.